Hi, this is Michael Uslan. You're listening to Batman on Film.
I'm vengeance.
I have given a name to my pain.
The Batman.
Always waiting for some Batman to save you.
It's simple. We kill the Bat of Gotham. I'm Batman.
Hello, Bat family, and welcome to this episode number 178 of the Batman on Film podcast. BOF is the sponsor and a proud member of the Batman Podcast Network. Check out all of our shows over at the batmanpodcastnetwork.com and follow us on Twitter at BatPodNetwork. I'm Garret Grev. Thank you for listening. Well, we've got a doozy for you, Bat fans, today. Maybe you've heard about it. There's a little something going on. If you've been on the internet, in certain occasions, if you've been at gatherings where maybe an airplane was flying overhead with a banner behind it, you may have seen it. But there's a little something on the way called, ready? Zack Snyder's Justice League. I know. It's brand new news. You've never heard of it before. But it's a pretty big deal, and it's going to be a big deal on HBO Max this upcoming March. But this thing just didn't happen all on its own, so we thought it might be interesting to learn a little bit more about the journey from, way back, feels like centuries ago in pandemic years, to 2016 and 2017, all the way up to 2021. And there is an upcoming book getting released written by Sean O'Connell. And we are going to have Sean join us for an interview in just a little while. But until we get Sean on, I have one of my dear, sweetest humans on the face of this very bat planet. He is a BOF senior contributor. He is 50% of the Straight Outta Gotham podcast. And he is the president of the Sopranos fan club, Mr. Peter Verra, straight out of Jersey. Pete, how are you doing, my buddy?
I'm doing good. Just hanging out here eating my gabagool. So
I don't know what that is. What is gabagool? I always hear it, and I still don't know.
The most delicious lunch meat you'll probably ever eat. Let's put it that way.
I love some lunch meat. Do you have to go to
here? What's up?
Do you have to go to a real old school neighborhood diner to get it, or deli?
No, you don't go. You could probably in Jersey you could probably get it at a diner, but I would recommend going to a deli or a pork store or something like that.
Oh, pork based. Do you think if I went to
any kind of meat? Oh, like a pork store is just a place where you get meat. That's just kind of what they're called. It's not necessarily it's not all pork, but. So
if I went to a butcher or the deli at a supermarket in Minnesota, and I'm like, yeah, give me some of the gabagool, do you think they would, I wonder if they'd know what to hand over?
They would. They would also know you're from out of town.
They're like, who is this very tall, Norwegian-y, slightly Mexican-y looking dude asking for Italian meats? I don't know, man.
It's a cured salami, so it's delicious, and it's along the lines of if you like prosciutto, you would get into this. So I hope you've eaten prosciutto. Have you eaten prosciutto?
Oh yes, 100%.
Okay, I didn't know if it made it out there.
Yeah, it does. We actually, it's not all I this week. So it's been historically cold. Mm-hmm. I should say we are recording this show. Today is February the 18th, and we're recording the show in the midst of a cold snap, basically coast to coast. It's cold everywhere. And in Minnesota, when it is very cold, we revert back to our warmest, most comfortable comfort foods. And in Minnesota, that means tater tot hot dish. And yes, I said hot dish. It's not called a casserole. In Minnesota, it's a hot dish. And I made one of those, and I took a picture because I don't know, I'm bad at social media. Probably not a great skill set not to have as a podcast host, right? But I don't know. Like, I use Twitter like it's Instagram. So I'm just like, I'm going to take a picture of this hot dish I'm proud of and share it on Twitter. And there are a lot of questions about, like, what is that? You need to describe it. So anyway, like, regional foods have a soft spot in my heart. I would love to be like a traveling eater. That'd be a great like
Guy Fieri without the horrible
haircut. Yeah, like Anthony Bourdain without the tragic end. Travel places and eat their foods. Like, I would be totally down with that. That'd be rad.
I totally agree with you. I would love to go out to Minnesota and try some hot dish.
Well, one day you will.
I'm dying to get down to Texas because I hear the gumbo is phenomenal.
The gumbo I've been waiting on. I think
some guy, some whack job in Texas always talks about mashed potatoes. I forget his name.
Yeah. Mashed potatoes and gumbo.
Potatoes and gumbo.
So if you're tuning in for the first time because you're interested in this book, Editor-in-Chief Bill Jet Ramey is a gumbo master, and Rick Shue of Adventures of Bailey fame is a mashed potato maestro, from his own words. So we've got a number of cooks, and clearly we're a good 6 minutes into this podcast. We've talked about nothing but food. So
you always know what's happening when you see a picture of a pot. From the Batman on Film Twitter feed. So.
Absolutely. Well, Peter, let's cover, before we get Sean here with us, let's cover a bit of news. And after that, I am going to give you a chance to earn back your street cred with another edition of America's favorite bat trivia game. What are you? But let's move this along a bit and let's get into the news.
3, 2, 1.
Cue music. Cue Becky.
Good evening.
All right, Peter. So this week we had some really big news hit, like huge news item to talk about. Like, this is the thing people are probably waiting to hear. And it's all about a movie universe we never knew if we were going to see more of again. There have been whisperings over the years, could we ever revisit these untold stories? Would we ever get to see some of these very near and dear to our heart actors play these roles again? But we just never knew. There's rumors. It could happen. It might happen. But we found out this week that, yes, it will happen. No, I am not talking about Zack Snyder's Justice League.
Talking about Batman Triumphant. Yes. The return of Joel Schumacher's universe.
Absolutely. Yeah. I am talking about Batman 89 and Superman 78. Comic books that DC announced are going to be coming to us in 2021. Huge news, Peter. What is your response to such a groundbreaking announcement?
I think it's great. The only negative I have is it's digital first, because everyone knows I can't stand digital comic books. I think it's a sin. But outside of that, I think this is a phenomenal idea. Not too long ago, there was a Batman 89 piece of art that made its way around Twitter, and it got us all really excited. I think maybe it was like 2 years ago, and it had like this pink lettering, but it stood out, and you saw like Billy D. Williams as Two-Face and Selena Kyle, and it just brought back a lot of like what ifs, because there's that whole like what would happen in Burton's Batman 3 and stuff. But to see what was released today, and then to see like that Anton First just Gotham City skyline behind this Keaton-esque Batman with that big block font Batman 89 popping out, like, you're just couldn't be more excited. And to find out the man who's actually writing this book is the scribe of Batman 89, Mr. Sam Hamm. I just really just am absolutely floored, and I cannot wait until this book meets print and I can hold it physically. So
my gosh,
I'm sure a lot of it'll be spoiled for me personally, but I cannot wait to add this to my long boxes.
There's no way I will possibly be able to wait till physical copies are released. I assume it'll come out in a trade after the digital. But Peter, it's funny you mentioned that piece of art that made its way around social media. I think it was about 3 years ago. It was actually Joe Quinones who is drawing this book. So
That
after
it was his piece of art.
yeah, it was his piece of
fantastic.
art. So it's even better because I remember
It's even better because
Bat-
you said his name, so I know how to pronounce it.
well, I looked it up, so you didn't have to try to. It is Quinones.
Okay.
And when that art started making its way around, and it came with sort of the news that a pitch had been made, and I think it sounded like those seeds were falling on some pretty fertile ground back then. We thought it was actually going to happen, and then it didn't. I was like, oh shoot, what a bummer, because this feels like a perfect thing. Elseworlds, I think, was still semi-functioning as a label at DC at that point. I'm like, oh, that would just be so cool.
Yeah, now
and
it's
then
just
my
Black Label.
Black Label, right? And then my wheels were spinning in advance. I'm like, well, if you can get this in print, down the line, they're going to be looking for content for these DC animated features. You really start expanding. So anyway, you don't even have
Don't
to
get
go.
me excited. Can you imagine a Burton animated Batman 3? I'm
No,
sure.
no.
Let's not jump the gun here, but like if this thing sells well, and I think it will, I think this thing will.
It will.
I think this will do just insane numbers.
Well,
the possibilities are endless where it could lead.
Absolutely. And 6-year-old Garret is just beyond thrilled with the concept of this, because I remember being a little guy and seeing the credits for, Batman 89, and Sam Hamm was a very easy name for a young dude to read. And I could read that name when the credits were flying by. So I remember Sam Hamm from when I was really young. So to have him, collaborating on this project is pretty outstanding.
And it's a little interesting. I didn't mean to cut you off, but because
go ahead.
it takes place after Batman Returns.
Yes.
I wonder if Sam will somehow get his original script for Batman Returns in this continuity. I know Penguin's dead and Joker's dead, so it makes things a little bit trickier. But originally, Sam had this kind of treasure hunt with Penguin and Catwoman looking for treasure underground. So, who knows what he could possibly come up with, because then what's it called? Daniel Waters did some heavy rewrites in Return. So
that's right.
It'll be cool to see where he takes it from, and what Sam is capable of doing. I like Sam's work, and I've read his version of his Batman 2. I think that's what his film is called. But
it's Batman 2, and it's a good point. Thank you for bringing up that this follows on the heels of Batman Returns, not Batman Forever or Batman and Robin. If you look at the concept art that Quinones has shared on his Twitter account, it is very clearly inspired by Michael Keaton and Michael Gough. Specifically, you see those 89, 92 actors and their likenesses in these roles with some tweaks, right? It's been blended with sort of a Batman the Animated Series look, which is just so pitch perfect. The way we got
Alfred has a mustache now, which is a little bit more traditional. So
100%. We've never got a mustachioed Alfred in live action. Since the 66 series. So that is just a real delight for me.
And Bullock will be in it. Bullock was teased in that artwork, so that's.
Did he not look like Bob Hoskins from Who Framed Roger Rabbit just a little bit to you?
Well, maybe a little larger. Hoskins, he's a little bit smaller, but he looked like a little bit more blown up.
Yeah, like a bigger, broader build.
Broader shoulders,
Like a little bit more of a brawler, a guy that could have, been the slugging, home run champion of 1930s baseball.
Yeah,
size guy.
Definitely. Yeah. I mean, he looks like a guy who smokes cigars and drinks beer. It's the first thing he does when he gets home. He doesn't eat dinner. But
nah, man, you got to get those calories.
I'm dying to find out. Is Knox going to pop up in this? Is Vicky Vale?
Please.
How great would it be to see Vicky and Selena get into a little bit of an argument?
Well, thank you for reminding me, because I was going to bring this up. For years and years and years before we ended up with the Halle Berry Catwoman movie disaster.
I still haven't seen it. I know it's Haas' favorite.
It is Ryan Haas, another BOF senior contributor, has every, I think, release of that movie and video game ever. For some reason, he's just
I believe he even has the French dub version on VHS.
Yes, amazing. But for years and years, that project originated as a spin-off from Michelle Pfeiffer and Selena Kyle. So it went through a number of iterations, right? So I wonder how that can show up with the plans were for Selena and how prevalent she is and all this. Anyway, it's just a world of opportunity. Obviously, we're a Batman podcast, but I grew up with Christopher Reeves in the blue and red. In the Superman, I say all the time, is like it's not even the 1A 1B scenario for me. It's like the 1AA as far as who I'm the bigger fan of. It's always Batman's my number one, but Superman is right there. In particular, what I grew up with, and seeing Superman 78 and a bit of a different approach, right? So where Batman 89, this is following on the heels of Batman Returns, Superman 78 is actually set before Lois discovers some of the activities of Superman and Clark from an identity standpoint in Superman 2. It's like an interquel.
That's great.
Yeah. So like super interesting. That's Robert Venditti, who I really enjoy his writing.
I love his Green Lantern stuff.
His Green Lantern stuff is great. He did a fill-in on Justice League for like a 2 or 3 issue run that just blew my mind. I loved him. Pretty shortly after Snyder and Tynion left the book. And I think this is going to be, he's talked a lot about how that was his Superman and his inspiration. I think that's fantastic. And Wilfredo Torres, who was one of the main artists on Batman 66, is providing the pencils there. So, we don't need to go in as much because we just gushed about Batman forever. But what are your thoughts on this one?
No, I'm. It's funny because it's like we didn't talk about Batman forever.
Oh yeah, that one's actually not included, Peter.
No, I'm all for it, and it's just it's cool just to see that version of Superman back. I mean, I'm dying to see what they do, and like just the whole like concept of it happening between Superman 78 and Superman 2 is interesting. And then it's like, well, when they get closer to it, which version of Superman 2 do they actually pay attention to? So
I'm on record as saying,
and that seems to be the theme of the day, right? The director's cut.
Well, yeah, absolutely. I'm on record as saying, the Richard Donner Superman 2 is my preferred version of Superman 2, just because there's consistency. Is not my preferred version. I actually like the Lester version better, just because the Donner version reuses footage that would have been from Superman the movie and puts it in a sequel that just doesn't quite work. And it was cool. It was a cool thing. So I hope
it's fun to have. I'd rather have it than not.
100%. I completely agree with that. I always think about this. You guys know me. Being a dad's a big part of my life. When I show the Superman movies to my boys, I will show the theatrical Superman 2. And then when they get older, not because it's like more mature or adult or anything like that, I'll say like, hey, here's this cool other thing. But from a story,
you're just saving yourself all these ridiculous questions that are coming.
Yeah. I'm just waiting.
Wait, what do you mean? Why are there 2 versions of this movie, Dad? Like, geez, read Wikipedia, will you?
Studio politics.
Yeah.
Whatever.
But I think this is really great because what really gets me excited, like I said, because of this, is just the possibilities of what can come after this. Because of how successful I think it will be. Like the success of Batman 66, which is kind of the brainchild of all this, right? Like because of Batman 66 getting this, we also got 2 animated movies with Anna West and Burt Ward and Julie Newmar and what's her name, Lee Merriweather. Like we got those movies. We got 2 animated continuations of that universe. So like, I feel like this is natural progression, and it's just going to do wonders. And sure. Like I don't know what's going to happen with 78 because I feel like a lot of those members of that cast have sadly passed on.
Yeah, or sort of old. Gene Hackman's retired. Sadly,
it'd be great to get like, I don't know, some kind of, the fact that we're just getting the books is phenomenal enough in itself that like, it just gets you excited because you're like, oh, there could be something here if this thing sells out. And I honestly do feel that Keaton is still the most beloved Batman live action. Like I know Adam West is a certain place in people's hearts, and he's probably number 2, and Affleck's, the hot guy at the moment for some people, but I still think Keaton is the top dog when it comes to live action Batman,
Well, and I was going to say earlier, the reason why I know this is sort of caught on is if any of you guys listeners out there, follow me on social media, on Twitter. You know that my tweets and my feed are about half fantasy football and half Batman and, other assorted dork stuff. But when something's really catching fire is when the fantasy football guys start talking about it. And I had people reaching out and asking me what I thought about the Batman 89 comic book, because, it's hit. I don't know what, sort of non have to go looking for it comic fan site it ended up on, but it's ended up someplace and made its rounds on Twitter enough that, the football bros were asking me about it. So I think there's going to be a lot of goodwill, both for Batman and Superman.
I mean, for our age group, 89 is such a big deal.
Totally.
Totally. That mid 30s guy right now, like if it wasn't for 89, none of us would be here. So the impact that film had, it transcends the character. And I mean, Batmania is insane. Like, Jed will talk about it. He'll talk about that whole Batmania back in the day and how the Dark Knight came close, but nothing comes close to Batman 89 and what that was like. So everyone was involved and everyone got invested. And, a lot of that was, I'm sure Nicholson was a huge part of it. So,
oh yeah,
Nicholson, so hot. He's a megastar. So like
megastar.
And then it's just to see this is just absolutely fascinating. And you get that beautiful poster, that piece of art that was just released is just absolutely stunning. And
yeah, it's gorgeous.
I mean, if I don't take that to Walgreens to get blown up on a poster, like DC they better hurry up and make one that I can buy legitimately, or else I'm making my own.
They're leaving money on the table.
Mm-hmm.
Not leaving money on the table, hopefully, is HBO Max. The sort of fake out I introed the comic book, news was, I don't know if you caught on to this, dear listener, but I was trying to make you think I was talking about Zack Snyder's Justice League, but I wasn't yet. I'll bring it up now. By now the trailer was released this past Sunday.
Mm-hmm.
You've probably listened to 7 or 8 different podcasts, dear listener, about people's reactions. So I don't want to belabor the point there. In fact, on this very feed, the Batman on Film Social Hour, which Peter participated in, did a reaction. So I don't want to go over that. But Peter, I feel like because this was such a big deal, and because we have an interview based entirely on the release of the Snyder Cut movement, I'd be remiss if I didn't ask you at least one question based on this week's release of the trailer, because it's a pretty big news item, right?
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
I want to ask you, what was your response? Because I've seen some quibbling online, believe it or not, controversial.
About this topic? No.
About this? Yeah, no way, right? Blow your mind. About the character designs for Darkseid, Desaad, and Granny Goodness.
Oh, dude, that's awesome. Like, dude, to see Darkseid was phenomenal. And he looks like a mean shut your mouth. Mm-hmm. Oh, man. Intense. And, like, Granny Goodness, she was probably the one I had the biggest gripe with, and not because of anything, but it just seemed a little like she was completely CGI and not really rendered to completion.
I saw a tweet that started going viral, and it said, "Elizabeth Warren, is that you and back?" And
oh, geez, that's rough.
Like, I know, I'm like, oh my gosh, people.
But I love Granny Goodness. I love it. I mean, how could you?
Oh, she's so bad. She's so bad.
Anything created by Jack Kirby is a gift from God, and that man is a legend, and he's bigger than the medium. And it's just, he's gotten so much love recently from, Peter, 2017 Justice League, Parademons, and
forget that 1980s
and just
1987's Masters of the Universe is a Jack Kirby movie in everything but the name. It is incredible. But Peter, if you're a huge Jack Kirby fan, weren't you outraged that these characters didn't look just like they look in the Jack Kirby illustrations?
No, I don't want Darkseid in a mini skirt. I don't want this tyrant overlord. Like, it's cool. I don't mind the updated. I thought it looked really cool. Desaad is probably my favorite member of Apocalypse.
He's a mean mother, man.
And I'm dying. Like, is Lashina in this? Are we going to see like the female Furies? I don't know. Who knows? But like, it's just cool. I thought he looked tremendous. Him walking up like with that in that, like, I don't know, dark side church, and you look at the stained glass windows, and it's the glasses in his form, and you see the fire pits in the background. I mean, that was astonishing to me. I He looked absolutely stunning. And I will say that while I've been kind of critical of Steppenwolf's design, I think it worked really well for me in this trailer. I was a big fan. I do prefer the theatrical look of that character just because I feel like it does feel more Kirby, but I just didn't like the whole like spiky silver thing. But like, I don't know, like it was cool. It was interesting to see him without the armor on, how he looked all stone. I was
Right,
into
man. Yeah, the without the helmet, I thought was the most interesting shot.
that was interesting.
I'm right there with you. I thought, like, of all the quibbles, and I'm on record, right? And we're like, it's important to me that this podcast covers things from a broader view than just the opinions of the people that are on here. Because we could sit here and editorialize all day. Like, that's not fun, because we want to have fun with as many people as possible. Interaction is important to me. But I have been on record of saying, like, there's some stuff in Snyder's work that doesn't quite work for me. It's totally awesome when it works for other people. I love that they enjoy it more than I enjoyed it. But of all the things to kind of quibble about, these depictions of these, characters, like, this is not something I have any issue with. It looked
not with Darkseid, not with those guys.
No, man. I did see, and I hate when I do this. I feel like I do this every episode. I bring up something I don't have the details on, it fresh in my memory. But there was a dude, I'll find it and post it to my Twitter, who did sort of like a very respectful kind of color re-edit to make a little bit more of the blue-gray distinctions in the design. And he even said, like, hey, man, I'm not trying to be a jerk. I love Snyder's stuff. I just wanted to play with this. And it looked really, really rad. Like, it worked really well for me. But I had no issue with this. It feels totally on brand for what Snyder does and fits. If it would have looked like Kirby illustrations in this world, I mean, with black suit Superman and muted colors all around, it would have looked so silly. I thought it looked great for what it was.
I'm excited to finally see these characters interact. My thing is just like, when it comes to this movie, I've almost, because I'm not one who fought for it. I'm not someone who was. I took what the studio did, I accepted it, and I moved on. And I feel like I've kind of moved on from it. So it's to this point, it's kind of like, I don't know, releasing like Justice League Dark Apocalypse War. Like, oh, okay, that's cool, you're doing it. I'll see when it comes out and I'll judge it and I'll compare it to that. But like, I'm not like, I was so pumped for 2017 Justice League. I'm a huge fan of BVS. I'm a huge fan of Man of Steel. But I feel like, with the course corrections that Warner Brothers has done with DC films, I've just kind of moved on with them. But I'll take a look at this thing when it comes out. I can't wait to watch it, and I'll judge it for that. But, I'm sure I'll like it way more than Justice League 2017. That's for sure.
Well, and me, I'm on the other side of the coin. I really like Justice League 2017, and I don't make any apologies for it. I think there's a good movie there. I look at it like the way I looked at movies growing up, comic book movies. Did they look awesome all the time? Was the CG always perfect? No. But if you tell a story well, and I think they tell the story fairly well, and if the characters are true in heart to what I expect from the characters, as me, just Garret, not I'm not speaking for anyone else, just me. If the characters speak true to me, then I can let some stuff slide, like really horrible looking mustache removals or whatever, right? But
for me, it wasn't really Superman that was the problem. Like, my biggest problem in that movie is Batman and the Flash. Personally, for me, I just feel like it's not the best depiction of Batman, and the Flash is kind of a coward.
Well, yeah. Ezra Flash is not my personal favorite Flash.
It just feels like they tried to emulate a little too much of like Tony Stark and Peter Parker.
It's funny. I didn't even think about that dynamic, but that makes sense. But what's funny is I like 2017 Justice League more than you. And from what I've heard from you, I might actually be a little bit more excited for Zack Snyder's Justice League than you are, which is, not what I would have expected. I feel like
I'm pumped for the Batman. Like, that gets my juices going.
Oh man, no, yeah, it's not comparable. It is not comparable for me. The Batman is coming big time. I feel like there's a separate bit of news we could have, a really bad rumor that made the rounds that we could have led into right there. But you know what? I'm not even we don't have to get into it. There's some really silly, on set rumors and gossip about, our Robert Pattinson.
I don't know how one individual could do that to the Batmobile.
Yeah, I know. Apparently, allegedly caught having an amorous relationship on top of the Batmobile, which was all just goofy Reddit made up fake stuff. But when people start making up stuff about a picture, it's how it's people are interested and care about it, because no one makes up stuff about things that no one cares about.
I did see this one set photo, and it's not anything spoilerish. It's literally just Matt Reeves, like Pattinson's looking at Matt Reeves, and Matt Reeves is like pointing at him to like do something or whatever. But for a second, I had to do like a quick take because it looked like Matt Reeves is dressed as the Riddler. He's wearing like this green poncho. He's got his face mask on. He's got his face shield on, and I was like, oh snap! Like that was, I thought I saw something I shouldn't have seen, but I didn't. It was just two people essentially talking. And I was like,
well,
his get up there kind of, he looks like the Riddler.
But here's the thing: we are, as of this recording, in the month before the year mark from it being released, right? That's a weird way to kind of break it down. But this is where we know content's going to start flying. There's going to be stuff on the internet. You will have some sort of spoiler at some point between now and the film's release. People are making up nonsense rumors about, amorous relationships on set and everything else. Some of that stuff is going to come. So if you are excited about the Batman and looking to get news about the Batman in a responsible, appropriate, and respectful way, there's only one way. There's only one way, and that's batmanonfilm.com. So I am personally looking really forward to this as we are counting down the weeks and months.
Mm-hmm.
And
that McFarlane, the Batman action figure. I hope Todd's listening because he's got to hurry up. I need something.
Yeah, between that and the Lee Bermejo print of the Batman Year One inspired advertisement. Yeah, those are the things I want.
Friend of the show.
All right.
Shout out to
friend
Lee.
of the show. What a great opportunity that was. I don't know.
I never got a chance to say hi to Lee, but I'll say hi to him now. Big fan of your work. I love your stuff.
It was so fun to talk to. I had a great time with that interview.
Joker, Luthor, all that stuff. Really good stuff.
All right. I want to make sure we save enough time for our esteemed guest. I'm actually really excited about this. I think it's going to be an incredibly interesting conversation. So, Peter, the next time I have you on, will you commit to me that we can do a Batwoman catch-up, since we probably don't have time to get to that on this episode?
I've never wanted anything in my Bat life.
Give me just one little tidbit. Has it gotten better or has it gotten worse from when we talked about it last time?
I think episode 4 is the best episode in the series.
Dude, Ryan Haas told me the same thing. All right. Well, I think we was on the group text. So
it's so good. It's so
all
good.
Right. So let's have you on again in the next couple of weeks, and you can give us more. I'll put some time away for more of a rundown on that.
Mm-hmm. Let's do it.
Oh, all right, Peter. Are you ready to redeem yourself?
No, I hate this game.
Well, it's coming for you. As I've said, it is literally America's favorite Batman podcast trivia game.
Then I must live in Canada because it's not mine.
Let's play a little round of What Are You?
I'd like you to do me a favor. I want you to tell all your friends about me.
All right, Peter. You've done this a couple times now, buddy. You know the rules. I'm going to refresh this for the listener. I'm giving out 3 clues. These are all like 3 normal, regular clues that you would, regular difficulty. And then if you aren't able to identify the subject of the game after 3 clues, I'm going to give you a 4th clue. The 4th clue is really kind of a giveaway clue. At which point you're going to be able to say if you know what or who I am talking about. The earlier you get it in the process, Peter will raise his hand and write down his answer. I'll give all the clues to the listener. But the earlier you get it down in the process, the more Batman you are. The more clues you need to get the answer, the more Robin you become. And this isn't Tim Drake Robin.
I'm Robin. I'm going to be Harold.
Dude, this is like Everybody Wants to Kill Jason Todd Robin. If you need all the clues. No, I'm just kidding. No one wants to kill Peter. Everybody loves Peter. All right, Peter. Are you ready?
No.
Well, get yourself ready. This one is a freebie right away. What are you? I am a character. Okay. So the rest of the clues are in the world of this being a character. All right, Peter. The first appearance of this character was in 1993,
Mhm.
but the character's roots come from Batman Year 2. It's a lot of info right there. That should have been the giveaway clue, I guess.
Oh, God, I hate being put on the spot. Okay, what's
Okay,
next?
first appearance was 1993, but the character has roots in Batman Year 2. Okay.
Mhm.
Clue number 2. This character did not appear in main comics continuity until 2020. Got that? That's clue 2.
2020.
All right.
Okay.
Clue number 3. This character was created by Alan Burnett and Paul Dini. Who am I? Huh? You know?
Can I get can I get a replay?
Yeah. All right. Here's the first 3 before I go to the giveaway. The character first appeared in 1993, but its roots reach all the way back to Batman Year 2. The character was created by Alan Burnett and Paul Dini, and the character did not appear in the regular DC Comics until 2020. Those are the 3 regular. The 4th giveaway clue. This character's alter ego is Andrea Beaumont. Who am I?
Oh, I know. This is fantastic.
It's a phantasm. Hey, Peter.
Wait, hold on. Like Batman Year 2 is not one of my most favorite Bat stories. So I'm like,
Sure.
I'm like thinking back, like Beaumont was in Year 2?
Now, Beaumont was not in Year 2, but the Reaper was in Batman Year 2, who was the major inspiration. And they essentially, back before the internet existed for people to rage about, did a gender swap of the Reaper to make the Phantasm. So here's the deal, Peter.
Oh, so they've been doing gender swaps since back in the day? No one can complain about this stuff.
No one can complain about this stuff.
I can just complain about these. I hate this goddamn game. So,
dude, they actually...
Freaking long boxes and they become totally useless because I can't answer it. Stupid.
There was a really interesting article on.
So
there was a really interesting article on Geeks Worldwide. Like the first gender swap went all the way back to the comic books to the Ultra Humanite as Superman's main initial supervillain, who just went from a dude to a chick in the course of 2 episodes or 2 issues. So
really?
they've been doing this forever. Yeah. Friend of
love Geeks Worldwide. Shout out to
great.
Casey Walsh.
Casey Walsh, man, he had retweeted that, and I read it. It was a really interesting article. But yes, man. So who are you? You are the Phantasm, Peter. Here's the good news: you answered correctly. That means you win.
Stephanie Brown Robin.
You are Stephanie Brown Robin, which is just fine.
She's one of my favorites.
Yeah, she's awesome. She's awesome. But you know what? You broke the streak. You actually got one right. Congratulations.
I don't know. This is like I feel like I just struck out and the catcher dropped the ball, so I ran to first base.
Yeah, man, it is sort of like if I gave you, I was like, all right, this character was the first superhero ever introduced. He has basically all the superpowers. He's created in 1939, and you're like, I don't know, give me the 4th. And I'm like, his real name's Clark Kent, and I'm like, yay, Peter, you got it. Who's my little buddy?
He told me, he's like, we could do trivia, or we could do this Peter's toy box thing, and I got these action figures to talk about them. I was ready, I came prepared, and they're totally useless. So now I got to go back in the basement, and it's like I did all that digging for nothing. So thanks for nothing, Garret.
Well, Peter, thank you for being a good sport.
And I just displayed these figures you can see them. It's a radio show, for crying out loud.
It's audio only. But I think it's nice. Hopefully the listeners enjoyed learning a little bit about the Phantasm. The reason I picked the Phantasm, next week we are actually going to do a Batman Catwoman recap with Batman on Film contributor Javi. So I wanted to sort of in Phantasm. That's the
Javi's a vast knowledge. He would ace this trivia stuff.
Dude, he's a deep well of knowledge. I heard him on dear friend Ryan Lauer's podcast. That guy's a very smart cat.
Spider-Man, though, you guys shouldn't talk about Spider-Man. I'll tell you that.
Oh, really? Okay. All right. We'll steer clear.
He's not a fan of Iron Boy like you are.
Oh, I love it. I think he's great. Tom Holland for life.
Tom Holland's a great actor.
Peter, here's the good news. We will not tell Mr. Sean O'Connell about how you fared here, even though, and if he asks, I'll just say I won't let him know that you got
I
the
feel like I'm
giveaway
hiding my
question.
report card from my mother.
Yeah. Well, we'll make sure he is the main focus of our conversation for the rest of the episode. So with that, let's bring in Mr. Sean O'Connell.
Hello, anybody home?
Okay, welcome into the program, Mr. Sean O'Connell. Sean is the managing editor of Cinema Blend and the author of the new book, Release the Snyder Cut, the crazy true story behind the fight that saved Zack Snyder's Justice League. Sean, thanks so much for joining the podcast. How are you doing today?
I'm wonderful. You guys both have excellent podcast voices.
Oh, really? Well,
Yes, fantastic. I'm going to try my
Thank
best to keep up.
I've been told I've got a face for radio, so
Good to be
You
here, guys. Thank you.
Well, thanks for coming. We've got here at Batman on Film, we've got contributors from a bit all over the United States. So you sort of get to hear a few different regional dialects when different guests come on to the show. I've been told I have a very mild Minnesota accent, so I know you're sort of from the Southeast. You'll probably be able to pick up on that.
Yeah, I can hear it. That's for sure.
All right. So, Sean, why don't you, for the listeners that might not be familiar with you or the website or the book, just give us a brief background of you personally and professionally.
Sure. I've been with Cinema Blend for a little short of 10 years now at this point, and I've been an entertainment journalist for more than 20 years. I've been covering the film industry for various websites, and most of them have kind of focused on blockbusters and pop culture films that sort of permeate that area of expertise. And so we've been reporting on everything regarding the building of both the DCEU and everything that Warner Brothers was trying to mount, as well as how it paralleled to everything that Marvel was accomplishing in the MCU. So we were really heavily tracking, Zack Snyder's progress through movies like Man of Steel and BVS and leading into his Justice League. And so where this story starts essentially is when Zack walked away from his Justice League film in 2017, which we all know now is because of family tragedy. He and his wife, Debbie, lost their daughter, Autumn, who died by suicide. And at the time when it happened, it was unusual because even just as someone who covers the industry and tracks the progress of these blockbuster films, anytime a filmmaker walks away from a blockbuster months before it's due to open, it's unusual. It's going to catch your eye. But then he gets replaced by the guy who is, theoretically, at the time, the top director for the competition across the street. Like, they hired Joss Whedon, who had done 2 Avengers films. And on your surface, you kind of think like, oh, that's, in a way, I guess that makes sense, because not a lot of directors had a ton of experience at juggling like massive ensemble superhero projects. But in hindsight, when you look back at it, you would never hire Joss Whedon to finish a Zack Snyder movie. Like, they have completely different voices. They make totally different movies. But I still kept an open mind, and I think a lot of people in the fandom kept an open mind until the Justice League movie came and was just a debacle. It's just a travesty. Mm-hmm. And, for me at the time, I kind of absorbed it, realized that it was really strange and didn't work out well. And it seemed like a Frankenstein monster of a lot of different influences. But I didn't pay as much attention to the people who eventually ended up forming the Release the Snyder Cut movement, which are all these fans of both Zack Snyder and DC who fought in the online trenches for 3 years to convince Warner Brothers to reverse course and let them finally see the version that Zack was planning on putting out, and they've succeeded. So as I tracked their movements and as I started to put together the elements of their bigger story, it shaped into this book.
And I think that, Sean, for me, was one of the more interesting surprises when I read the book. I wasn't quite expecting the book to be, which I really interpreted as sort of this love letter to the members of both the movement itself and Zack Snyder. I think I had kind of, when I got the copy to review, expected it to be a bit more of here's a history of the timeline. And you do have that in the book, not to say that isn't there. But I think the driving theme that I was surprised and quite honestly, pleasantly surprised a bit, is to kind of get some of these little micro stories of different individuals. How soon did that become clear to you that was the path you wanted to take?
At the very beginning, and I credit my wife 100% for even putting me on that path, because when I was sort of mapping out to her what my vision for the book was, my wife's name is Michelle, and again, to her credit, every time I come up with an idea or a pitch or a, hey, I think I'm going to do this sort of thing, she's always like, yeah, you should do that. Like, she's super supportive and really, gung-ho about anything I want to try. And so when I said to her, like, I'm thinking of writing a book, she was like, yeah, okay. And then, kind of like, what's it going to be about? And I sort of laid out the nuts and bolts of what had happened to Zack Snyder on Justice League and the changing of the guard of the directors and how the reshoots, turned out. And she's kind of stopped me mid-pitch, and she was like, listen, I know why that's interesting to you, but I don't really care about all that stuff. Who are these people? Who are the people who are dedicating their time and effort and personal lives to getting this movie released? And I said, honestly, I don't know. To me, they were just a hashtag, media. And she said, why don't you find out who they are? Like, figure out what that is. So I just started to interview as many of them as I could. I tried to get them to talk on record, and they were very cautious at first because they've been burned by media coverage prior to, a few times that they opened themselves up to other journalists who said they were going to try to tell their story and then painted them in a really negative light. But as I got to hear their stories about why Zack Snyder's films are so important to them, or why this push, one of the things that the Snyder Cut movement does is they dedicate half of their time and energy also goes to the American Foundation for Suicide Prevention, and that's largely in Autumn Snyder's name, Zack's daughter. Hearing about how much they care about mental health and how much the charitable contribution of the movement is important to them. And for them, it's even more important than the movie itself, although they're super geeked up for it to be coming now. I realized that was as compelling to me, as all the sort of nerdy behind the scenes film stuff that really interests me. And I hoped that in capturing their story, that it would open this entire saga up to another audience, who might just view it as, oh, yet another superhero movie that's coming. Like, it's more important than that.
You mentioned that the fandom is a big part of why you wrote the book. This fandom has been accused of being very toxic and hostile at times. You've quoted a very large number of people who are very prominent within this movement. And it seems that some people that, we've all interacted with a few of them, the big names. Do they get a sense that they were defending Snyder himself? Like, how do they go about justifying some of their behaviors, such as in the book you mentioned the Sesame Street issues, F. Elmo, and it seems that Snyder kind of bangs the drum for them to continue some of their crusade. And it's where I felt like at times he could have said, hey guys, why don't you pump the brakes a little bit? We can get this thing done, but let's do it in a more, I guess, classier fashion.
Yeah, for sure. And it's funny because I am the target of them quite often.
Well, just yesterday we became a target ourselves. So.
Oh, did you really? Interesting.
Yeah, there's a recent blip, which provided some hours of entertainment, and then after a bit, it gets to be a bit much. So, and I know, Sean, without putting you on the spot with some of this stuff, because that wasn't the intent of why we wanted to have you on. It is sort of a balancing act, and you see both elements represented in the fandom. It's clear you chose to tell a very particular side of that story with this book, and it comes from almost a more positive human interest piece. But how do you balance how you view the fandom as a collective?
Because I can basically say that, having been immersed in them for the past 2 years, that negative aspect, which is definitely there, is not, in my opinion, the prevalent theme of the movement. If I had gone into this story blind, and tried to really just tell, well, I did. I went into it not knowing anything about them and really tried to get a general sense of what they were trying to accomplish. And if I had sat down to do that and was only overwhelmed by the negativity, then I would have wrote that side of it. Like, that would have been the viewpoint that I took. As I did my research and as I talked to most of the people, the positivity and the want and the desire to defend artistic integrity and to raise money for charity was the dominant theme as I spoke to these people. And I really do believe that really loud, negative vocal bit that exists on social media. It's hard to deny that it's there. It's absolutely there.
Mhm.
But I don't think it accurately represents the larger part of the movement. I think it's a big part of the movement that is active on social media. I think social media as a tool is pretty destructive. And the people who do use it on a daily basis to attack, that's kind of what they do. And this movement has lost a little bit of its way in the days and weeks following the announcement of the cut, because there is a component of the movement that was really just in it because they enjoyed the fight. You know, they needed a target, and for them it was Warner Brothers for a long period of time. They don't even know necessarily who at Warner Brothers it is. You know, they just know it's Warner Brothers.
Right. Somewhere.
There's
There's a boogeyman somewhere.
Yeah, exactly. Or God forbid, it's anyone who slights, you know, Zack Snyder on any level, kind of thing. And there's a lot of hypocrisy inside of that too, because they'll go after whoever is the hot target for the moment. And the bulk of the people who I spoke to since the cut has been announced, they've been on a celebratory victory parade, but you can still see the vitriol that exists online. And I don't think you're ever going to necessarily douse that, because it just lives kind of there in social media.
Mhm. Yeah.
Yeah, it becomes the magnifying glass and the bullhorn for some of the most negative elements in any group, right? Whether that's political or within different segments of fandom. I mean, certainly Star Wars experienced some of that with some of the aggressively negative fans and their response to The Last Jedi. So it's interesting for you to hear, or for me to hear you walk through that, because to me, when I read the book, I didn't realize it going in again, but I read your book and I started realizing, like, this is sort of like a really modern geeky example of gonzo journalism, which I didn't, I wasn't expecting. And, you know, was that a known intent for you, or did you sort of land there as you were working through your process?
Oh no, totally landed there. And in a way, like, this is not how a book should be written. This book was very much like a breaking news story written over the course of 8 or 9 months, because it felt like I was writing it as the movement was crossing its finish line, almost, because you felt all of these activities happening that were generating all of this awareness, and driving us to this potential finish line of the cut getting announced. Like, when I started the process of writing this book, in my mind, it would have been almost like a Donner Cut situation, where it would have been 20 years before anybody.
That's what I thought.
Yeah. And Zach told me himself in the interview that he did for the book, that he is stunned that it happened as quickly as it did. Like, he expected it to be something that would happen years from now. And really, I just thought it was sort of driven by ego at the studio level, that they were never going to sort of reverse course and admit that the version they put out was bad, you know? So,
right.
Well, without the existence of the HBO Max as a streaming service, you know, as an option for them to put it out there, I don't think we'd be sitting here today talking about the Snyder Cut. If it had to wait for theatrical, and especially the way COVID has messed up theatrical, you know, across the board.
Oh my goodness, yeah.
There'd be no way to get a 4-hour Snyder Cut into a theater anywhere. So
I totally agree with you on that. I feel like I wonder. I'm curious as to how much the movement, because the book's about the movement and the people involved, but I wonder how much of them is actually the reason that this movie came out. Because I've always envisioned this as a direct-to-DVD special, similar to the Donner Cut, years later. And it just seems that the way that COVID has put the film industry on hiatus, AT&T needs to make money somehow, and they need to sell HBO Max. To me, it seems like that's more of the reason than it is everyone on Twitter really using hashtags and such.
Yes,
thoughts?
I totally agree that I think it's like, see all of the above, right? There is absolutely a component of the executives at Warner Brothers just needed these guys to stop. I used to listen to used to listen to a radio show, Opie and Anthony. I don't know if you guys are familiar.
Yeah. Well, I mean, yeah, huge in the New York City area. They were big.
All right. Do you remember how they used to refer to their fans as pests?
100%, yes.
And
one of my best buddies interned from them, so yes, he was one.
That's what Snyder had. Snyder had pests, you know, and
that's a very accurate description.
With Opie and Anthony, they would even say something along those. And if you know, you won't get the analogy if you don't know the show. They would almost say, like, these pests are out of our hands, you know, like, if you're going to anger them, they're going to come at you, sort
Mhm.
of. And there is, to go back to, the toxic fandom and the other fan bases, there is something weirdly masochistic about the way that people go after the Snyder Cut fans. Like, if you kick the hornet's nest, and I see it all the time now, I do pay attention to it. Someone will come into social media and throw a grenade, mildly even, and then get shocked at the attention, the negative attention that they get from the Snyder fans. And I would want to say to them, like, if you just left them alone, if you just did you?
Well,
have
it's
to keep that
like
kind of
Alfred's line in the trailer, like, don't and enrage the Red Bull with the
is.
red cape or whatever it is that he says. So you get that, but I mean, I feel like people should be allowed to. From personal experience, I've said some things, and I know people have taken it the wrong way, and it's like I know for a fact that it didn't always come off the way it should have in 160 characters.
Yeah.
And it's sometimes you just like, you know what, I got to bite my tongue because I don't want to be on my phone all day, basically saying that's not what I meant. You guys got to calm down. And then you got to be like, it's always a bad idea because it's like, as someone who loves BVS in a tweet, like I shouldn't start my tweet like that just so I don't get,
Right.
attacked.
Yeah, it is a little bit of a self-fulfilling prophecy. Somebody says something bad about the movement responds in kind.
Mhm.
And the sort of one hand washes the other.
Yeah.
And
Feelings.
they have done good work. Like the amount of money they've donated to charity is noble. It's great. It's fantastic. Like I fully support it. It's, there are just some people who I think even, some people even in the book who I think are a little bit more toxic than others. And it's just, it can get disappointing because I feel like sometimes they get, it feels like these people are almost enabled or entitled now that they have their movie where they think that, okay, this is going to go somewhere else. And it's kind of like, well, let's see how this is received first before we start jumping to conclusions. Like there's a reason why we're here to begin with.
It's so funny, Peter. That's literally the next thing I have on my sheet. I wanted to ask, Sean, having spent so much time with the people within the movement and with the individuals in your book, I think we can all log into social media and see what people are saying. The calls for like, Ben Affleck's going to make his own movie still, or there's going to be a series. What do you feel like the movement will focus on after the movie's release, and what do you anticipate seeing happen?
It's a really great question, because I think it's split pretty evenly in a bunch of different camps. There are some that are very content to just realize that they got the movie that they fought for, and I try to remind them as many times as I can, but they quite often don't even listen to me. Like, don't be disappointed if this is it,
Right.
this was the goal and you got it essentially, so enjoy it. You're seeing a cut of Justice League you never thought you were going to get.
Mm-hmm.
I admire the restore the Snyderverse pivot, like, again, there's elements in this movement that just need something to fight for, they are lost a little bit, or they feel empty if they don't have a rallying cry to sort of get behind. I think that's a small amount, but there's enough people in it that feel that way. When you try to break it down and explain to them just rationally how difficult it is to continue a franchise like this, they don't want to hear it. Like, it's very it's very expensive. You're juggling a million actor contracts, like back to the bruised egos in Warner Brothers. Like, they don't want to admit that the Snyderverse, is different from what they pivoted away from. They very clearly pivoted away from. One of the reasons why I think that there is a possibility for all this to go forward, and people are almost clinging to this, is the fact that HBO Max, like you said, Peter, they need original content. They need things to invest in, and
They do.
this does do really well for them. They have some freedom, and the streaming services are not afraid to pour money into original content. They have the ability to greenlight something that Zach wants to continue to do. I think there are a couple other factors in addition to that. Like, I don't know if Zach wants to do it.
Well, he said on, I feel like, numerous podcasts, he feels that he's done. He's very busy. He says that he's moved on, but he's always said, like, I'm open to the possibility. I do wonder where in this stage of his career he feels like he is with DC Comics in general. Maybe he wants to move on. I know we all know he loves zombies, so Army of the Dead is something I'm really much looking forward to and seeing that. And I wonder where else he would go. I mean, what is it? The Photograph, is that the name of the other project he's always been trying to do?
Does have
So
that story about a war photographer. He says that he wants to adapt the Fountainhead multiple
yes,
times, and who's to say that there's another script or two that lands on his desk? Like, I don't want the fan base to ever feel like they're mad at him if he doesn't want to go on. Like, they have to understand how much time that this man has poured into the DC franchise. And with any filmmaker, they burn out eventually. You know, like, how much do you want that filmmaker to keep going if their heart isn't 100% in it? And why not give the opportunity to another director who's chomping at the bit to tell a version of a story that you want to do? The Ben Affleck one, I know everybody keeps mentioning that. It seems like the one that's at least furthest along in development. Like, there was a good script at one point, you know, that Ben seemed really confident in. Would he want to do that as like an HBO Max limited series? Maybe. You know, have it not conflict with Matt Reeves's project and operate in its own little universe on HBO Max. That feels feasible. But every other member of the league seems like they are lined up with the next thing that they're going to do. The Flash has his Andy Muschietti film, and Gal and Patty are going to get together for a third Wonder Woman, and 2 is in pre-production right now. And so there's a lot happening.
At least we get to see Affleck in that Flash movie. You know, like, I'm excited for that. Just I love Keaton, and I'm very excited. Mostly excited. You've said this before, and I agree with you. Seeing what Snyder does in Justice League with Flash, I feel like Flash and Batman were probably the two characters who were probably the most out of character in that film.
Yeah.
So I'm excited to see Affleck, at least, whether if it's his swan song and he goes out his way, which he's always talked about. I will appreciate that. I'm glad he's getting that, but I don't know. I feel like there's only so many people who will subscribe to HBO Max for reruns of Sex and the City and The Sopranos. So they do need some new content. I know Green Lantern's on the way, and they have Harley Quinn, and I believe I can't remember what network Stargirl's on anymore, but they do need to come up with something. But who is in charge essentially of what gets made and what's not? Is Warner Brothers so against? It seems like Warner Brothers is trying so hard to move on from Snyder that this is almost kind of like a backpedal in a way.
Right.
And I'm just wondering, like, who is in charge of just calling the shots?
It's a really great question. I believe on HBO Max's side, it does boil down to Jason Kilar. And he wants to greenlight this. I believe he's got enough flexibility and pull to make that happen. It all comes down. The complicated thing is that it all comes down to numbers. If the Justice League movie completely overperforms for HBO Max in a way that, like they did with Wonder Woman 3, Wonder Woman 3, as soon as 84 dropped, like 2 days later, they greenlit it.
So what is their goal? Do you have an idea? Do you have a number?
Well, no, the big issue with the streaming services is that nobody knows. It's not like box office where you can look at it on a Sunday and say, oh yeah, that crushed.
There's no downloads that they have or anything like that. There's no way they can keep track of this.
Well, they don't. Yes, they keep track of it, but they don't share it with anybody. None of the streaming services do. The only times you ever hear from a streaming service of how something did is when it overperformed, and they come out with numbers that could be made up and pulled out of thin air for all.
Right.
So
yeah. There's not a lot of oversight.
Okay.
None. Like zero. There's no metric tool that the industry can use to say this is how this did or this is how another thing did. So anytime Netflix comes out, it's usually Netflix who's the one that shares anything. And they're like, oh, the new Adam Sandler had more downloads than it. It's like, how do you know? And what are you comparing?
And partially when they come out with some of that information around the Adam Sandler Netflix performance, I feel like they're just defending themselves a little bit because everybody knows they're still giving Adam Sandler hundreds of millions of dollars, right? So I'm like, all right, Netflix, we get it. You think you've got a good deal here. We believe you, kind of wink, wink, nudge, nudge.
And the funny thing about the streaming services too, and in a way, it's a little bit comparable to box office because if you buy a ticket and you go into a movie theater and you watch 20 minutes of the movie and then you leave, you still bought a ticket, right?
Right.
But with streaming services, if you press play on something, like I don't even know their full metrics to how far into it you have to watch before it counts as you. There has been different reporting about how deep into a movie you have to get before they count it as you're an actual viewer. It could be as little as 15 to 20 minutes before they're like, yep, that's a view. You stayed with it.
Right.
But how many times you start something on Netflix and get, especially a 4-hour movie, like,
yeah,
what is he going to do? And how are we honestly going to be able to tell?
Well, that's the runtime, I think, does play a factor because it is longer. But like, I also feel like the movie does face a little bit of an uphill fight, being that the next day Falcon and Winter Soldier drops
Yep.
right off the heels of WandaVision, and even off the heels of season 2 of Mandalorian. Like, Disney Plus is crushing it, and then Warner Brothers has their Kong vs. Godzilla movie a week later.
That's
feel
the
like-
monster that,
Yeah,
to me,
the-
people aren't talking about. It could
the
suck the
window.
air out of the conversation for the
Exactly.
general audience. For the general audience, it's not Kong versus Godzilla is not going to do anything for the movement, right? Nothing is going to detract them from this picture.
Well,
But
even
for the
comic
general
fans in
pop
general.
culture audience, it could be a very big deal.
This is a big reason why I made the argument. Personally, I thought it would have done better as 4 episodes.
I agree.
I agree. We both agree.
Water
with you
cooler
there.
talk. It's why every week everyone talks about WandaVision.
Of course.
Or get 2 months
know?
of subscriptions out of the deal, right?
Yeah.
Do it from the back half of 1 month into the other. So
Well, I mean, I'm trying to think of recent examples of seasons of something that you're highly anticipating. For me, one example is The Haunting of Hill House, which I love
Sure.
the season of, and the second season has dropped, and I still haven't watched it. If only because I just didn't have time to sit down and binge. But if it was something that, was coming out on a week-to-week basis, then even if like 2 episodes go past and you start to hear other people talk about how great it is, you could say, all right, cool, I'm going to go catch up with those 2 episodes. And then you're back on the train and you know where everybody else is. But
right. If the train leaves the station and it's gone, it's tough to catch up sometimes.
you don't know where anybody else is in the story too. Like, you can't be like, oh my God, did you see that part? And they're like, no, I've only watched X amount of minutes. So it's hard.
Well, that's why I want to stay up and watch it as soon as it comes out. I don't want to get spoiled on Twitter. Like, I feel like I have to watch this in real time just so like I can stay ahead of the game.
2 questions I wanted to touch on before we part ways here. When I read the book, obviously you sort of got to go back and rewrite the last chapter and then include a lot of messages from the folks you talk about in the book towards Zack Snyder. But it feels like there could be room for an additional epilogue in the future once this thing comes out and we see how it does, see how the fan movement responds to having it released and what their reaction. Something tells me they're going to be very positive about it. Have you thought about going back and doing a revision in the future, or is that just too far away at this point?
I would like to do something else in addition. I would like to almost, follow through, because people don't realize, like, the book is coming out March 1st, but I turned it in last July. And so it was literally right after the cut got announced, but I haven't covered, in the book format at least, like anything to do with the reshoots, with additional photography, anything to do with DC Fandom and his appearance at his own Justice Con, like any of the Ray Fisher stuff that has occurred, like anything that might have to do with Snyderverse stuff expanding, like if he gets the green light to do, like, there's plenty more story to tell. This book really just had to be a sort of window into this, this frame of this story kind of thing. But the story has legs and it just keeps going, and depending on where it goes, I would like to potentially explore it. But I'm gonna let it all. I'll see where all the cards start to fall as we
Absolutely.
play out.
I think one of the things that was interesting for me, and listening to hearing you speak about your approach to the project, it makes more sense now. I was initially a little bit thrown off by the fact that we have all these fan interviews, but really nothing from anyone inside of Warner Brothers. I wanted to ask, was that a deliberate editorial choice in the story you wanted to tell, or were they maybe less than cooperative if you had reached out at all?
Oh, they wanted no part of this.
Okay, big surprise.
They wanted to them, honestly, and again, it's worth emphasizing that when I started writing this book, nobody at the higher up level wanted this movie to come out. Like, all of those wheels started turning long after I was into this process. So any of my contacts at Warner Brothers, including a lot of other people who I talked to who are involved with the movie, with Zach's production, would say to me off record, like, oh, that's great. I'm so glad you're telling this story. Sure, we can talk. What did Zach say? Like, it was always, he was the last line of defense and everybody is super loyal to Zach. And throughout the course of writing the book, Zach was always telling me through his people that he couldn't talk. And I wasn't sure what the reason was. I kind of attributed it to either the fact that he was negotiating with the studio and maybe didn't want to say anything on record that he, that would have to walk back later. Or he was planning his own telling of this story, because
Sure.
I kind of think one day he will do a documentary of some sort that explains from his point of view everything that happened. So a lot of people who were officially connected to Zach didn't want to talk unless he did. And no one at the studio level wanted to open up to anything that was happening, because you remember their dirty laundry had not been aired, until long after I turned my version of the book over. And even a lot of that is so he said, they said, that until you can verify it, like I really didn't want to put anything in the book until I could actually verify it. And that's all of that stuff is very hard to get to, because there are certain stories that took place in certain rooms that only the people in the rooms know about, and they don't feel like talking on the record.
Very interesting.
Yeah.
Very interesting. Well, Sean, thanks so much for your time. Maybe when at some point you get to go back and tag on that final chapter or two after the movie comes out, maybe from the studio will want to play ball and sit down with you. But, we appreciate you joining the show. The book is Release the Snyder Cut, this crazy true story behind the fight that saved Zack Snyder's Justice League, available March 1st. Once again, Sean, thank you for joining.
I really appreciate the time, guys. Thanks so much.
I'm Batman.
What a treat, Peter, huh? What a treat to have Mr. Sean O'Connell join the show and share more about his book. That was fascinating.
It was informative.
To me.
Yeah.
Very informative. It's always good to learn more. I think the more we learn, the better we are. Don't you agree?
Yeah, 100%. We
All right. Well,
deep dive.
Peter, thank you for joining. What do you have to plug? Where can the dear people find more of you?
You can follow me on social media. That's Twitter, Instagram, and Zack Snyder's favorite Verra at Pete Illustrated. You could follow the show that I co-host with the champion of Long Island, Eric Holzman, Straight Outta Gotham, straight_O_G on both Twitter and Instagram. Follow us on Facebook at the Straight Outta Gotham group and the Straight Outta Gotham Facebook page. Check out my reviews of Man Bat, Dark Detective, Detective Comics. I've got Funko Pop reviews on Batman on Film YouTube and BatmanOnFilm.com. Other action figures as well. Some Mafex, some McFarlane, some DC UC, some Mattel figures. I try to cover a bunch of stuff and try to just add a little spice to that Batman on Film gumbo that's so famous. So you could just follow me there, and I'd love to interact and chat with you and talk all the good stuff that we love to talk about.
Well, that's delightful, Peter. And next time you come on, we'll skip the trivia. We'll do a Pete's Toy Box.
No, I don't want to skip the trivia. I want to actually get one.
All right, fair enough. Well, let's make time for both. We won't talk about how awesome a Batman 89 comic book will be for 15 minutes straight.
Why wouldn't we? Why wouldn't we?
I know. It would be off-brand if we didn't. All right. Well, thank you very much. Dear listener, if you would like to follow me and interact more, you can find me over at Twitter. I am at Garret Waito. That is GARRETWATO. Or you can read the words that I write instead of just listen to the words that I say over at BatmanOnFilm.com. Comic book and movie reviews up. I'd love if you would check those out. And if you would like to rate and review the podcast, we'll make sure it gets read on air. We want to hear what you have to say. And if you have thoughts, questions, comments, suggestions on topics, you can email me at garret.grev. That is GARRET.GREV at batman-on-film.com. And remember, it's not who you are underneath, but what you do that defines you. Thank you for listening.
You have been listening to the official podcast of the one and only Batman on Film website. On Twitter, follow BOF at Batman on Film and the Batman Podcast Network at BatPod Network. For Jet and everyone at Batman on Film, I'm announcer Rachel. Thanks for listening to the authoritative, definitive, the original Batman on Film.